What period of time were you a member of the Simon City Royals?
From 1991 until I got out of prison.
Till
2009.
2009. The first time I met TJ, I believe, was at his deposition.
This video deposition of Thaddeus Jimenez being taken on behalf of the defense.
Soon after TJ was exonerated for murder and released from prison, he sued the police in the city of Chicago.
This case is captioned Thaddeus Jimenez versus the city of Chicago et al.
This tape is the only lengthy interview with TJ that I could get access to.
Please identify themselves for the record.
Andrew Hale for the individual defendants.
He's being questioned by Andy Hale, the attorney who was hired to take the lead in defending the city.
I thought TJ was remarkably charming, polite, didn't ever appear angry at me, or, just very smart, too. For a kid who grew up, in the setting he did, I was like, wow, not what I was expecting.
At the time of this deposition with Andy Hale, Thaddeus Jimenez was a 31-year-old adult.
How would you describe the way you were prior to being arrested in February '93?
I was troubled. I didn't have a good life.
That's the TJ we're going to look at. The kid before he was put through the system. Before TJ spent millions of dollars to start a gang war, before he sued the city, before he spent 16 years in prison, he was a 13-year-old kid accused of a murder that he always said he didn't do. It was easy for the police to believe that TJ could kill someone. He liked carrying a gun, flashing gang signs, and acting like a tough guy. But he was also just a kid. He liked bikes. He played basketball. He liked doing art in school. He even wrote poems. TJ had a big family that cared about him, and they tried to stop him from joining a gang. But TJ did it anyway, and that put him in the crosshairs of tough-on-crime policies in the 1990s. From WBEZ Chicago, I'm Frank Main, and this is Motive. Violated into the Pee-wees. Even among former gang members, there's a code of silence. They don't like talking to cops or newspaper reporters, for that matter. Snitches get stitches.
When did you first meet Larry Tuffle?
I can't remember the exact date.
Did I pronounce it right? Tuffle? Is that
Tuffle.
Tuffle. Larry was a friend of yours, correct?
Yeah.
According to TJ at his deposition, Larry was a friend of his, but he wasn't anymore. As kids, Larry and TJ both joined the same street gang. TJ was 11 years old. Larry was 12. I couldn't find a phone number for TJ's old friend, but I did find an address. It was to an apartment building on the north side. I started flipping through names on the directory.
It's not in here.
Then a man who I guessed was the superintendent popped his head through a window above me.
Can I help you guys?
Yeah.
I'm right here.
How are you? Looking for Larry? Larry Tuffle?
Lawrence Tuffle?
Lawrence? The super buzzed us in and told us he would go get him. Lawrence?
Yeah.
Wait, Lawrence or Larry?
Doesn't matter. Lawrence, Larry.
Have a seat. I explained that we were doing a project about TJ.
Yeah.
I wanted to see what Larry, the adult, could tell me about TJ, the boy.
I thought this was over with already. I really don't like to dig through the past and talk about it again,
Larry Tuffle had a lot to do with TJ's murder case. The guy who was killed was a good friend of his, and Larry pretty much wanted to be left alone.
I still feel like I'm in danger, because if I ever ran into any of those gangs in the past, is there any way that I could think about this? You guys could come back or something before I say anything anymore? Okay. Just to be on the safe side. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
A couple days later, Larry had a change of heart, and he agreed to sit down and talk.
I figured, what can it hurt? I'll just tell my story. I got nothing to hide. I was wrong. I wasn't the perfect kid. I was an evil, rotten little bastard, too. I'm not good. I never said I was a good person, I learned from a lot of my mistakes, Okay, where do you want me to start? From the very beginning, how I got into the neighborhood, or do you want to just...
I want to go back there. I want to start...
You want me to explain to you everything, how the neighborhood was at the beginning and everything?
I do. The neighborhood that Larry and TJ ran around in during the early 1990s is called Avondale. After school, they hung out around the intersection of Belmont and Sacramento Avenues.
It was just really gang infested back then. The neighborhood was really bad at the time. A lot of stuff happened, a lot of bad stuff.
In the 90s, gang violence in Chicago was exploding. News reports were warning about kids carrying guns and shooting other kids. And a lot of those stories focused on the south and west sides and African American and Latino neighborhoods. But the mostly white neighborhoods on the north side had their own gangs that stood on corners, fired guns, and fought over territory.
People are always talking, oh, it's crazy on the south side. No, the north side was just as crazy as the south side, man. Same thing.
This was the tough-on-crime era. Soaring murder rates became a talking point for politicians. Gang kids were described as, quote, super predators, and the police felt a lot of pressure to take back the streets.
You're caught up in the gang.
To reach out to the youth, 3 Chicago police officers created this anti-gang rap video.
Ain't it a shame? You're caught up in the gang.
It wasn't the most successful police outreach initiative.
I was just stupid, following people, man, trying to be cool.
For Larry, there were lots of reasons to join a gang.
I just joined so I could have girlfriends, Back then, being a gangbanger, they thought it was cool, to be like that.
Caught up in the gang.
They'd have parties, they'd steal stuff, they'd break stuff.
It was fun to brick people's cars with bricks that would go by, beat up people, get into all kinds of trouble. We got a rush off it,
And if that rush wasn't enough, there were plenty of drugs.
Powdered cocaine, blotted acid. There was just drugs everywhere. Everybody was doing it. It was the thing to do at the time.
There was also some stuff going around the neighborhood called Wiki Sticks.
There was embalming fluid and PCP dipped joints. I even smoked some of that shit, man. I'm telling you. You don't want to do that shit, man. That was some strong shit.
In those days, there was gang graffiti all over the neighborhood. At the top of one building on West Belmont, there was a big mural that said SCR. That stands for Simon City Royals. That's the gang that TJ and Larry joined as kids. And to join, they had to go through an initiation. Here's TJ again in his deposition.
How was it that you became a member of the Royals gang in 1991?
Oh, I took a beating in.
A group of gang members would punch and kick you for a certain number of minutes. It's called being violated in, or V'd in for short. Larry Teufel.
I got V'd in for like 2 minutes. A bunch of guys jumped on me and beat me.
What's that like?
Oh, it was terrible. I mean, I was just a skinny bag of bones at the time. They were bigger guys, I was probably the skinniest guy, the youngest guy to join besides TJ.
Now, I've seen some reference to being a member of the Pee Wee Royals. Is that a fair characterization?
Correct.
What does that mean?
The Pee Wee Royals was kind of a junior division of the larger Simon City Royals.
Pee Wee would encompass, like, what ages?
15, 16, and under.
Okay.
TJ and Larry had some things in common. They were both mixed race, half white, half Latino. They both didn't really know their fathers, and Larry was just 6 months older than TJ.
We were all basically just kids. We just reached puberty at the time and shit,
When did you first meet TJ, and what'd you think of him?
He came to the neighborhood, he was a younger guy. We hung out, we did some bad stuff, drugs, alcohol, that all goes with it. And I didn't really like him at first.
Larry says TJ was trying to prove himself all the time. TJ was small, only 5'4" and 115 pounds, but he was a fighter.
He loved his gang, that he was true to his gang, though. He was down for the Royals,
He felt empowered by the Royals, and he'd punish other kids for breaking gang rules.
He was the first one that would jump out if anything happened. He was pretty down.
Walking around the neighborhood, these Pee Wee members of the Royals, these 12-year-olds, they'd be armed.
Prior to your arrest in 93, did you ever possess any type of gun?
Yes.
He always had a gun on him all the time. I mean, I had a gun on me, too. A good thing that I never shot anybody with any of those guns, man. Because, man, I could have been in prison myself.
Where would you get these guns from?
The older members of the Royals.
One of the main jobs assigned to the Pee Wee Royals was packing a gun and patrolling the neighborhood for rival gang members to defend their territory. They called it working security.
When you work in security, who would be the main opposition gangs that you might encounter?
the Insane Deuces, the Latin Kings, the Gaylords.
According to Chicago gangs, there's two different types of families. They're either people or folks.
People or folks. Those were the two alliances that almost all the gangs in Chicago fell under. It was a system set up by gang leaders years earlier, sort of like the American League and the National League. Simon City Royals were folks, so if you were in another gang under folks, like Maniac Latin Disciples or the Spanish Cobras, then the Royals were cool with you. If you're a gang member under people, like the Latin Kings or the Vice Lords, you were definitely not okay with the Royals.
That's how it went back in the neighborhood. You were either folks or people.
So a kid from the Latin Kings comes on your block, what happens?
Oh, they would immediately either get beat up or killed. That's how it was. Like, if we walked into their neighborhood, we'd get shot and killed, too.
Gun violence is still one of the biggest political issues in Chicago, but in the early 90s, there were almost twice as many gun deaths in the city as there are now. In 1991, there were 922 murders. Nearly a third of all victims were under the age of 21, more than ever before. One summer day in Avondale in the early 90s, Larry was in his first gun battle.
All the Royals were in the park. We were hanging out, and 2 carloads of these other gang came. I think they were deuces. They came out with a bunch of bats and pipes. They came to attack us, and boy, did they make a mistake, because one of the Royals brought out a gun and started shooting at them, and they were running for their life. This would happen in broad daylight. It was crazy, man. I never seen anything like that before.
That was too much for Larry. He decided to get out of the Royals for a little while. TJ was down for his gang, and he stayed.
Did you ever shoot a gun?
Yes.
How many occasions?
I don't remember.
I mean, did you ever shoot at anybody?
No.
So the times you would shot a gun would just be what, fool around?
Yeah, target practice.
But shooting real bullets?
Yes.
Okay. Where would you do target practice at?
On the abandoned railroad tracks.
A 13-year-old kid in a violent gang, doing drugs, carrying a gun, a bit angry. Later, at his murder trial, TJ was described as a, quote, one-kid crime wave. The judge called TJ a little punk, too young to shave, but old enough to commit a vicious murder. When TJ was found guilty of murder, his mother broke down. He was originally sentenced to 50 years in prison, but his mom's anguish caught the judge's attention. The judge told TJ, I'm going to take 5 years off your sentence because of your mother's reaction when the verdict was read, but it makes me wonder where she was when you joined a gang.